please visit my website, programtokill.net. Go to plans and prices for even more exclusive information. You can also support me now on Patreon. Add me on TikTok. And leave a like and comment.
Chapter 36 Netherlands, The Pedophile Kingdom and Sodom and Gomorrah of the Modern World by author Joachim Hagopian. The lineage of former Holy Roman and French nobility comprises today's House of Orange, ruling over the constitutional monarchy of the Netherlands. The Dutch royalty owns major multinational corporations such as Royal Dutch Shell, Royal Dutch Airlines, Philips Electronics, and Holland-America Line. The royal family has evolved its interests as a high-level authority, currently operating as a branch of the Vatican's Roman Empire, wielding considerable influence over such powerful entities as the Rand Corporation, Koch Industries, Princeton University, founded in honor of the House of Orange, some of the world's largest banks including AMRO and investment firms like BlackRock, the largest financial asset management institution on the planet, worth an estimated $7.4 trillion in client assets. Coincided by design with the planned Corona scamdemic, this year BlackRock's been busily bailing out the U.S. Federal Reserve, buying billions worth of bonds to keep the House of Cards economy from imploding. In one fell swoop in April, seizing control over the U.S. Treasury and Federal Reserve. This private, unelected monolith has monopoly control now over the entire U.S. economy as the centralized economic chokehold over the global masses prepares to tighten its death grip noose over humanity. As the long-planned implosion of the world economy goes up in smoke, by engineered design, this latest power grab amidst the so-called pandemic crisis is all about consolidation of power and control into fewer and fewer hands, lending new meaning to the thoroughly bankrupted USA corporation owned and operated by the financial juggernaut of the Crown. The stakes have never been higher in 2020. With the worldwide mafia pedo-crime cabal no longer an illusory paranoid aberration, the planetary controllers realize enough of the global masses are finally onto them, and as a result, are rushing to make their dystopic vision of one world governance a reality sooner than later. When it comes to sexual perversion, the House of Orange Nassau of the Netherlands is every bit, if not more, perverse and decadent, as the Saxe-Coburg-Gothe clans masquerading on both sides of the English Channel as the British royal imposters as well as the Belgian royalty. According to an April 2013 Financial Times article, Queen Beatrix's late 19th century ancestor, maternal great-grandfather Willem III, greatest debauchee of the age, wrote the New York Times, liked to stand on the balcony of his Swiss villa on Lake Geneva and open his bathrobe when a tour boat steamed past. In Dutch slang, he was a pencil salesman. In American vernacular, he was a first-class pervert, but Dutch scandals grew far darker and more disturbing as time went on. Queen Beatrix's own mother, Queen Juliana, was allegedly raped and impregnated by her own father, consort Prince Hendrik, who also impregnated countless mistresses. One of Prince Hendrik's illegitimate sons, after growing up a bastard in anonymity at age 60, was suddenly discovered by a historian in 1979. The newfound recognition was short-lived though, as the official Royal Orange coldly snubbed him. 7 years later, he made the news again after shooting and killing his wife, reneging on his end of a homicide-suicide pact with his terminally ill spouse, and wound up spending a 4.5-year stint behind bars in Holland's pre-euthanasia era. With his life a sheer embarrassment to the royal family, he lived quietly in the shadows till his death in 2015 at 96 years old. Though his German crown daddy Prince Hendrik lived a much shorter life, reaching only 58 before croaking from a heart attack, leaving only one official offspring, his daughter Juliana, the future Dutch queen by his only spouse, the military officer, avid hunter and farmer, sprinkled his Johnny Appleseed like there was no tomorrow, siring up to 10 illegit kids in all. That's some royal family making, infidelity, incest, and illegitimacy galore. All the classic trademarks of degenerate European royalty. Oh, and lest we forget the other royal tradition, pedophilia. At best, the consort of Dutch Queen Beatrix, German-born one-time Hitler youth, Prince Claus von Amsberg of minor German nobility, also shared a checkered past, allegedly caught cheating on the Queen during their royal family visit to New York City in September 1982. Reportedly, Claus was influenced by his and his wife's longtime friend, confidant, and Queen's legal counsel for 20 years, Frits Salomonson. The alleged homosexual pedophile took his pal Claus for a walk he'd never forget on Big Apple's wild side, the always lively, orgiastic gay coke and poppers snorting scene of the early 1980s. Dutch media began spinning titillating rumors of kinky promiscuity, apparently enticing the German periodical Der Spiegel to feature a sensational piece blowing the prince's cover, his wholesome image as hetero family man. Struggling with the role as Queen's secondary appendage and non-stop lack of privacy since his wife was crowned queen in 1980 and burdened by the breaking scandal, questioning his sexuality, Prince Claus apparently fell into deep depression and by November 1982 sought refuge and escape in treatment at a Swiss psychiatric hospital. Aside from those nasty rumors that wouldn't go away, mainstream media settled on disclosing the Queen's consort was suffering from a severe bout of major depression. After a year of constant tabloid gossip claiming Claus was a homosexual with hints he preferred underage boys, eventually by late 1983, the press backed off from pursuing the sexual scandal any further. Der Spiegel never did run their feature bombshell story, but only a watered-down, heavily edited, much shorter version. Meanwhile, the sympathetic Dutch people mostly felt sorry for the overshadowed royal, grateful for his siring 3 boys to give the Netherlands a guaranteed male heir to the throne for the first time in a century. Since his shaky start of a marriage to the future Dutch queen in 1965, as another obscure German Hitler-linked import, the second one in a row just 2 decades after their bloody war against Nazis, Dutch citizens gradually warmed up to the unassuming charm of the soft-spoken prince, won over and impressed by his unassuming, low-key style, and by Holland's adopted royal sire's due diligence at mastering the Dutch language with hardly a German accent. His efforts to fit in overcame Dutch citizens' initial grudge. 2 decades earlier in 1962, 4 years before the German nobleman married the future Dutch queen, Claus was summarily dismissed from his West German diplomatic post in the Ivory Coast due to sexual blackmail over an alleged affair with an East German spy. Then, on more than one occasion over the years, Prince Claus was observed and allegedly photographed in sexually compromising situations with 12 and 13-year-old boys in Dutch brothels and at child orgies hosted by his sex buddy Salomonson in his notorious S&M torture chamber, cellar. For decades as an alleged homosexual pedophile, Prince Claus was reportedly blackmailed as an unspoken royal liability. Outside of occasional symbolic ribbon cuttings, the last 2 decades of his life sheltered away from the media, cloistered atop a Swiss mountain retreat. Despite maintaining such a low profile with increasing health issues, culminated in 2002 with his death, like so many male members of European royal families, evidence remains strong that Prince Claus upheld the long-standing, despicable tradition of the black nobility bloodlines, shamelessly sodomizing children. Frits Salomonson, the kinky pervert hosting these sadomasochistic orgies, with Prince Claus among his high-profile guests, also had photos taken and circulating of Frits all decked out in sadist drag with underage Moroccan boys inside his own basement crime scene, providing ample blackmail leverage, keeping him somewhat in check, yet still protected from lifetime arrest due to his cozy royal relations. The pics were offered to editor Willem-Alexander of the paparazzi magazine Prive, who turned them down. His reason: "I'm not going to press charges against the attorney of Her Majesty." In 1999, Frits Salomonson sued 2 adversarial neighbors for damages for outing his perversions in a letter to the Amsterdam mayor, but lost. After gunshots were heard, a meter-thick slab of concrete in Salomonson's backyard was poured to provide a barrier for allegedly covering up his dead victims. After Frits was further exposed in the Martin Van Traa Commission report over his laundered mobster drug money in the IRT scandal, in 1996, the royal favorite had to be let go as the Crown Counsel and, eventually humiliated by all his criminal overexposure, Frits hightailed his sick ass to friendlier, safer pastures in nearby pedo-friendly Belgium for his twilight years. With old Frits now 86, he's sheltered by his fellow aging pedo buddies, the powerful Lippens brothers, 78-year-old Count Leopold Lippens, still mayor of Naka after 4 decades, and 77-year-old Bilderberger Maurice Lippens, chairman of the board of the 2008 defunct Fortis Bank, that after a decade of fraud charges, Belgium finally dropped its case in December 2018. Recall from last chapter that these cruel VIP sodomites go back to Regina Louf's earliest memories of hometown abuse. More to come on the Queen's favorite pedo lawyer Frits later. Next comes the tainted legacy of Prince Claus' predecessor, father-in-law, fellow German prince consort to Queen Juliana, Prince Bernhard, exposed former Nazi SS officer, notorious Bilderberg founder, scandalized for his $1 million bribe from Lockheed, and another alleged pedophile with a heavily tarnished reputation. Recall last chapter that the Belgian scandal's key witness in Regina Louf as a 1980s network child sex slave alleged that she was trafficked to a party aboard Prince Bernhard's yacht Jumbo the Six. Also, Bernhard has been cited a hunter at royal child hunting parties, an attendee at satanic cult rituals involving child sex abuse, torture, and blood sacrifice, and reportedly on a regular basis sexually assaulted teenage girls. Of course, Bernhard had his share of bastard kids too, forced to reluctantly admit 2 before his 2004 death, with an illegitimate third daughter emerging AD, of course from 3 different mistresses. See a royal bloodline pattern here? Just like the Saxe-Coburg-Goths. What is it about these sexually deviant German princes and their Dutch queens? Aside from the current King Willem-Alexander married to an Argentinian Queen Maxima, daughter of Jorge Zorreguieta, a cabinet member during the deadly military junta's dirty war, killing thousands in the 1970s and early 1980s, and one other Dutch king in the distant past, every single other king and queen in Dutch history has always married a German, and nearly 2 out of every 3 House of Orange marriages have all been with German nobility. From Maiche Cat and Jurian Mason's scathing 2010 piece for Infowars.com on how Bilderberger's first president Prince Bernhard's 3 grandsons, one the current king of Holland Willem-Alexander, the deceased Prince Friso, and the youngest of Queen Beatrix's boys, Prince Constantine, carry on the royal family tradition's torch of treason, blatantly moving the planet towards New World Order tyranny through increasingly centralized, megalomaniacal, blue blood control. The objective: to dismantle the nation-state, strip the people of their self-determination and free will, and position themselves as sovereign rulers of the planet. Their common cause does not deviate from the age-old directive, but their means are custom-made to fit current times. Back in the days prior to Prince Willem-Alexander's 2013 crowning, the future king focused on water management control, concentrating his energy cutting up the New World Order's slice of the global pie, recommending the World Trade Organization develop and consider virtual water balances using a resource accounting framework when assessing and negotiating agriculture subsidies and trade in agricultural products. Harnessing the most basic life-sustaining commodity, water, that should be a universal human right as yet another natural domain subject to strict global governance, leading to privatization, the Dutch king is a mere cabal tool whose trained expertise role is all about centralization and consolidation of royal power and control at the expense of every earthling's birthright to privacy and individual freedom. On the Royal House of Orange website, at one point Constantine's resume boasted he was program associate of the Bilderberg conference. Prepping for his big family Bilderberg gig, the prince cut his teeth at Booz Allen Hamilton, the notorious military-industrial complex intelligence consultancy, private contractor, a central figure in wargaming and spying on our every move. Constantine's next career move was the Dutch European Commissioner's Office, and then onto the notorious NWO fixture, the Rand Corporation, where he assumed command at Rand's Bruxelles office, writing papers on RFID, tracking technology, and global regulation of the internet. Author of the Bilderberg Group, Daniel Estelin sized up Rand's importance in the NWO hierarchy this way: the interlocking leadership between the trustees at Rand and the Ford, Rockefeller, and Carnegie Foundations is a classic case of Bilderberg modus operandi. The Ford Foundation gave $1 million to Rand in 1952, at a time when the president of the Ford Foundation was simultaneously the chairman of Rand. Also from last chapter, there's eyewitness Anne-Marie van Blegenberg's account, forced to observe ritual child killings by her mafia husband, whose crime family sponsored them for sexual blackmail, where a Queen Beatrix charity program dispatched Dutch kids from youth detention centers to be ritually sacrificed. Anne-Marie maintains that the following VIP notables were invited blood sacrifice participants: the late second son of Prince Claus and Queen Beatrix, Prince Johann Friso and his wife Mabel Wisse-Smit, herself a former girlfriend of the 1991 murdered Dutch mobster drug kingpin Klaus Bruinsma, along with other infamous attendees that include global insurrectionist terrorist George Soros, former Dutch President Mark Rutte, Head of Parliament Geert Wilders, former Justice Minister Piet Hein Donner, loyal protector for accused pedophile Joris Demmink, and former Justice Minister Bilderberger Ernst Hirsch Ballen. All are Luciferian blackmail Dutch reps from the international crime cabal circuit. No accident that Soros and Prince Friso should meet up at an occasional sacrificial BS get-together. Friso's gangster mall wife was also director of Soros's Brussels-based Open Society Institute, small NWO crime cabal world. With Soros having a hand in the pot seemingly wherever trouble is looming in the world, the big question then becomes, did Soros know about Mabel Wisse-Smit's mafia past prior to hiring her? Or, as a December 12, 2003 EIR article probes, did Godfather George Soros show his humanity and loyalty by overlooking all the evidence about Mabel's involvement with mafia thugs, drug deals, brutality, and torture to keep her on as a representative of his Open Society Foundation in Brussels? Or were these gold stars on her resume, which, to begin with, made her the ideal candidate to represent the biggest drug pusher and mega thief in the world? This rhetorical question sides with the latter. Though the hapless witness Anne-Marie was horrified of the child blood sacrifice and notified police, courts, Interpol, and every authority she could think of, none were willing to investigate the elite's systematic murder of throwaway, institutionalized children. Again, from last chapter, recall that Prince Johann Friso's name also came up in connection with the royal sport of lethal child hunting parties. That was prior to Prince Johann's fateful run-in with an avalanche while skiing the Austrian Alps in February 2012, leaving him in an extended coma for the next year and a half before his August 2013 demise. While studying in the US at Cal Berkeley during the late 1980s, the prince was alleged to have also engaged in homosexual activity with minors. Like father, like son, America just brings out the worst in these repressed, away from home royal degenerates. It's no surprise Prince Friso would end up with the ex-girlfriend of Netherlands' very own Al Capone, the one drug dealer. According to journalists Jerian Mason and Micha Kat, Johann's gangster-involved wife Mabel blackmailed the pedigreed pedo-gay prince into marrying her. Apparently compromised like his dad Claus, Friso had to voluntarily give up his next-in-line succession status to the throne while the prime minister quietly maneuvered past the obligatory parliamentary approval vote for every senior royal prior to marriage. Professionally, the one-time Goldman Sachs banker, Prince Friso, acted as a royal economic hitman for the World Bank, dishing out unpayable loans to third-world nations for natural resource thievery. Friso was also affiliated with numerous NWO organizations involving microchipping, radio tracking, MRI body scanning, and satellite spying technologies. The most media-covered murder case in Dutch history occurred on Walpurgisnacht Night of May Honest, 1999, a satanic holiday when child blood sacrifice rituals are regularly conducted. 16-year-old Marianne Vostra never made it home from her boyfriends in the rural northern Dutch province of Friesland. Marianne was raped, strangled, and had her throat slashed, found the next day in a field. After years of allegations swirling around a local asylum center housing 300 mostly Muslim refugees, producing 10 arrests that went nowhere, years alter a 5-kilometer radius dragnet was eventually set up, whereupon 5,000 residents in the area voluntarily submitted DNA. According to media accounts, a local farmer, Jaspar Staringa, living 2.5 kilometers from where the corpse was found, stepped up to offer his own DNA evidence that led directly to his 2013 conviction. From the unlikelihood of that illogical outcome, after more than a decade of the unsolved mystery producing an avalanche of speculation percolating over who would commit such a grisly act, slashing the victim's throat ear to ear on a satanic holiday no less, inevitably many would conclude the murder had to be a satanic blood sacrifice. Then, a confessional from an anonymous witness's first-hand observation surfaced. Prince Friso was present at a satanic execution of a young woman in the province of Friesland in the night after Queen's Day in 1999. Incriminating evidence linking the same royal prince to attending another child blood sacrifice ritual? For more clues, let's take a closer look at the company the royal family keeps. As Queen Beatrix's friend ever since their college days at Leiden University together as Minerva Society members, it was natural that Frits Salomonson would become the royal family confidant, the crown's personal attorney from 1975 to 1995, and even the appointed guardianship to future King Willem-Alexander. Known as Uncle Frits to their three boys, Salomonson was far more than just Prince Claus' fellow pedo-perv in New York City. Throughout the 1980s as chairman of the board of a company called TexLight, Salomonson was also alleged to have laundered some serious dirty drug money. Holland's IRT drug scandal, finally exposed in 1994, was simply the European counterpart to the same global organized crime network of the Bush-Reagan regime and their underlings Lieutenant Colonel Oliver North, running drugs and arms while Lieutenant Colonel Michael Aquino and Lawrence King ran their MK Ultra Franklin pedo-scandal. Aside from Salomonson, since the 1980s, the Royal Orange Nassau crime contingent was also represented by Frits' HIV-infected law partner, Oscar Hammerstein, born in 1954, obviously not the famous American song lyricist, who shared links with underworld mafia, along with aristocratic law partner, Count Rutger Jan Schimmelpenninck, born in 1949. They were all covertly moving and money laundering a vast volume of heroin and cocaine into the Netherlands and beyond. In fact, the IRT scandal of the 1980s resulted in the Parliamentary Van Traa Commission of 1994, tasked with examining both Hammerstein and his mentor Salomonson's improprieties. Oscar was even briefly detained, accused of laundering 17.5 million guilders while law partnering with Count Schimmelpenninck at their Bokel de Nuray law firm for the drug kingpin Klaas Bruinsma's drug syndicate. According to a member of the Van Traa Commission, drug money was laundered by TexLight. The murdered drug trafficker Klaas Bruinsma would have injected millions in startup capital in the firm, the now retired attorney, Mr. F. Salomonson, as advisory board president, would have been in the know of the criminal activities. Once the Dutch Capone was violently out of the way, quick to fill the power void to continue warm liaisons with the royal surrogates were Bruinsma's mobster successors Etienne Urke, Charles Geertz, and John Engelsma, the latter even helping Prince Friso's wife Mabel Wisse-Smit in 2003 lie about her relationship with Bruinsma. Engelsma and Prince Willem-Alexander also both ran the 1999 New York City Marathon together. Geertz was the longtime mafia player who ran the global child pornography network. One more connection between the royals, their sexually deviant legal protectors, Frits and Oscar, the Bruinsma organized crime cartel, and both drug and child sex trafficking is Pakistani hashish importer and diamond dealer Fuad Abbas. During the late 1980s and early 1990s, he centered his drug and child trafficking operation in Belgium and the Netherlands while selling hash by the tons to Bruinsma. Further, Abbas was linked to money laundering through Salomonson and Hammerstein's TexLight. In the Netherlands, as the world over, it's one big happy extended crime family. On top of all that, one time or another, the royal Prince Claus, his son Prince Friso, Salomonson, Hammerstein, and Schimmelpenninck have all been accused child abusers, if not traffickers themselves. Bilderberg founder and Queen Beatrix daddy Prince Bernhard also developed the Gladio Stay Behind network in conjunction with CIA and NATO through his 1001 Club, fostering more collusion between security services, organized crime, and Euroterrorism. Thus, the singular theme of royalty, intelligence community, heads of state, and church covertly tied to organized crime operating the international trade of trafficked arms, drugs, and child sex remains a long-time embedded historical fact. Speaking of church, an independent commission in 2011 estimated that Catholic priests sexually abused 10,000 to 20,000 Dutch children since 1945. Moreover, the Dutch Public Prosecution Office maintained a policy for decades of simply filing away cases literally in a box, essentially subverting justice by never charging or arresting rapist clergy and deliberately letting the statute of limitations expire. As a related aside, Queen Beatrix was Grand Master Knight of the Order of St. John, affiliate partner to the Catholic Sovereign Military Order of Malta, in 1959 knighted by her Sovereign Military Order of Malta father, Prince Bernhard. Current Dutch King Willem-Alexander is honorary commander of this same secret society, as well as head of the Loyal Orange Order, an Irish Celtic Masonic order. Queen Beatrix's nephew, the Italian-Dutch Prince Jaime Bernardo of Bourbon-Parma, is also part of the powerful Farnese bloodline that established the Jesuits as another secret Catholic military order and, as a Maltanite, served as Dutch ambassador to the Holy See until 2018. Also recall that the former Jesuit Superior General aka Black Pope, Peter Hans Kolvenbach, hailed from the Netherlands. With roots and tentacles connected to Catholicism, Protestantism, Nazism, Jesuitism, in case you haven't noticed, the Black nobility House of Orange bloodline is known to finance and manage Luciferian cults and secret societies. So we come full circle, the House of Orange. Just as the House of Windsor, Saxe-Coburg-Gothe of both Britain and Belgium, and House of Rothschild, along with the Astor, Russell, and Sassoon family bloodline dynasties, behind death cults and Luciferian secret societies, all have made vast fortunes immersed in the illicit drug smuggling trade. For centuries, the Dutch royals have profited off the sale of opium since the early days of the Dutch East India Company and Dutch Trading Company that by 2000 morphed into the world's sixth largest bank, ABN AMRO, worth $480 billion, partially owning Saudi Hollandi Bank of Saudi Arabia. The Dreyfus family has partnered with the House of Orange, opening up their Louis-Dreyfus group in the Netherlands. Current head of the company, Margarita Louis-Dreyfus, is now married to Philip Hildebrand, the current BlackRock vice chairman. The Koch brothers family is Dutch, originating from the Netherlands, with David and Charles Koch financed by the Dutch crown. While the Dutch royals are among the wealthiest monarchies in the world, today's sobering consensus is that they are also heads of a full-fledged narco-state. Continuing evidence of the ever-growing reach of the Dutch narco-state terrorizing the Netherlands erupted last September 18, 2019, when top defense lawyer Dirk Wiersum was gunned down outside his home in an upscale Amsterdam suburb. Wiersum was defending a witness supplying state evidence against a rash of drug murders in recent years. Until the people realize that their idolatrized royalty and their friends are the overlords of this lawless mafia-ruled pedo world, we can expect nothing to change. Turns out the Dutch elite are notorious historical traffickers of both illegal drugs as well as human slaves. From author Louise Shelley's Human Trafficking, A Global Perspective, the Netherlands became the second most powerful slave trading state in the Atlantic slave trade. Long immersed in big-time international drug trafficking, conjointly with illegal arms and stolen children, the Netherlands remains Europe's major destination hub for both drugs and children, particularly in the one nation where both soft drugs and commercial sex are legally available more than anywhere else on the planet. As a result, the United Nations Office on Drugs and Crime, UNODC, lists the Netherlands as the #1 destination for human trafficking victims, and according to US State Department, it's also Western Europe's only country among the world's worst 5 nations as a source for trafficked victims. In other words, in Holland, underage sex slaves are both coming and going at a record pace. Moreover, 80% of all the trafficking victims inside the Netherlands are forced into labor as sex slaves, also higher than any other country, as the Sodom and Gomorrah of the modern world. In just a recent 7-year period from 2004 to 2011, with the number of globally trafficked underage girls more than doubling from 10 to 21%, and boys quadrupling from 3 to 12% out of the total human trafficked population, this trend has only grown worse in the last 9 years to reach a pandemic scourge blighting this earth. In a study from October 2017, combining both UN and national statistics, in the Netherlands from 2012 to 2016, there were an average of 1,320 reported cases of trafficked Dutch girls aged 12 to 17 each year, making up nearly half of the total reported female victims in the nation's sex industry. But when estimated unreported cases are included, the actual number of victims jumps to at least 5 times that amount. And this particular study was restricted to Dutch girls only, not the much larger influx of trafficked foreign girls from Eastern Europe and beyond. Plus, the borderless boundaries of European Union nation-state members and notorious EU policy record has only contributed to this ever-widening global pedophilia network. As a recent outrageous, mind-blowing illustration demonstrating just how disastrous and unsafe conditions are in the Netherlands for children, the National Dutch Children's Shelters for Asylum that house its children from Vietnam have been responsible for losing 97% of its young Vietnamese residents to child traffickers. In other words, virtually all the children under the Dutch Cares Asylum program are apparently funneled directly into the child sex trafficking pipeline. In March 2020, National Rapporteur on Human Trafficking and Sexual Violence Against Children, Herman Bolhar, announced, "The suspicion that a large proportion of these children fall into the hands of human traffickers or people smugglers have been confirmed." This astounding news followed the story last June 2019 that an amazing 1,600 kids have gone missing from asylum centers in the Netherlands over the previous 4.5 years. What does that blatantly say about how the Dutch government fails to take care of its children? It's nothing short of a child sex trafficking accomplice. And it has everything to do with the fact that pedophiles and their friendly protectors have infiltrated the federal government, pretty much all federal governments in virtually all Western nations. Sadly, that's what it says. So what's the Netherlands' answer to their dire straits situation of so many missing children? Hire a 72-year-old battle-worn Leiden U. Minerva alum gatekeeper for Secretary of State for Justice and Security. Ankie Brokers Knoll. The Telegraph prints a reader's expressed opinion chagrin over Dutch inner club nepotism. She, Ankie Brokers Knoll, is going to pick up asylum cases at the age of 72 and manage everything. With all due respect, you cannot take this seriously as a citizen. Was there really no one else available? So, it is not about the knowledge and skills, but it is about who you know. In February 2018, Herman Bolhar replaced outgoing rapporteur Corinne Detmeijer after her dozen years of allowing thousands of children go missing on her watch. Both Demmink and Detmeijer are close Leiden U. Minerva Society friends with Joris Demmink, along with another Minerva pedo-enabling Justice Minister Ivo Opstelten, so it's obviously this pedo club where all their loyalties lay, because it's definitely not for the children. Also, Bolhar and Demmink were both students and friends of their mentor, Rolf Gonsalves, who prior to becoming a lead prosecutor at home, brutally murdered, pillaged and plundered both adults and children abroad in Dutch New Guinea throughout the late 1950s, and then promptly knighted at home by Queen Juliana in 1960. Familiar theme of royalty saluting thugs and pedos? Just ask Queen Elizabeth. Herman Bolhar's job before letting all the asylum kids become the latest easy pickings in the sex trafficking trade, in addition to being senior fellow at Harvard's Kennedy School of Government, Bolhar has worked as head honcho inside the Public Prosecution Service, right alongside his pedo buddy Justice Demmink. See what I mean? In June 2019, an article in the Volkskrant newspaper pointed out the atrocious track record on children. Lost in Europe is the name of the network of European journalists that has been trying to piece together the fate of disappeared children in Europe since last year. It concerns thousands of children, perhaps 10,000 figured out by Europol 2 years ago, although nobody knows for sure because the figures are kept so sloppily. They are off the radar and no one knows what happened to them. It is suspected that some of them have fallen into the hands of human traffickers for sex work or child pornography or forced labor, because children to whom no rooster crows are good trade. Again, as long as gatekeeping pedophiles and their enablers are handpicked to remain in charge of children's welfare and responding to violent crimes committed against them, nothing will ever change, and it's obvious that in the nearly 2.5 years since Rapporteur Bolhar took over, conditions have only further deteriorated. All of these unbelievably alarming facts in such a small, affluent nation are the resultant consequence of a security services blackmail-controlled mafia amalgamation of royalty, banking, and political elite operating openly in direct partnership with the country's out-of-control organized crime. In effect, all the above unique dynamics render the Dutch establishment among the world's biggest criminal profiteering racketeers, holding the dubious, shameful distinction as the intracontinental global trafficking epicenter of the planet's most profitable illegal commodities: drugs, arms, and children. Having reached a worldwide crisis, the growing urgency to hold these elites accountable in their vast criminal global enterprise has become most dire, and nowhere is it more blatant than the little old wooden shoe windmill nation of Holland. With the thumb in the dike, the dam's ready to blow and all hell's breaking loose. The Dutch-Belgian connection is embedded even in the Dutroux X-Dossier compiled by Belgian police, disclosing details of a highly organized, integrated pedophilia network based on the testimony provided by a Dutch victim witness named Catharina. She supplied further evidence of the long-practiced web of child sex abuse operating in the Low Countries, perpetrated by elite members of a Luciferian international cult. 6 months after the Dutroux scandal broke, PV 150.006 dated February 20, 1997 addresses the first-hand experience of a woman who was sexually abused as a young child for many years by her wealthy businessman father who belonged to the pedo cult. Near her father's estate in Lugano, Katharina claimed she observed the making of a snuff film. She also explained that the satanic cult included abduction of children in Belgium and Poland trafficked to the Netherlands. She alleged that she and other children were ritually abused and tortured at a number of locations, at a small airport in The Hague, strictly used by the Dutch royal family, inside an Italian consulate, at the cult's main headquarters in Zurich, Switzerland, and at a UN building in Geneva, as well as other sites in Belgium. Katharina stated that child victims abused in satanic rituals by the occult sect comprised of nobility, lawyers, and army officers would often disappear via a butcher shop in Rotterdam in the Van Hellemonstraat. Again, another aristocratic family involved in both child sex abuse and drugs, the Schimmelpenninck family owned several castle estates linked to a pedophile cult that abused and tortured young children, causing altered personalities inducing dissociative disorder, similar to MK Ultra mind control. Among the locations where the cult practiced satanic ritual abuse mind control was the Westerflyer estate in Diepenheim near Markello, owned by Count Rutger Jan Schimmelpenninck. From the police Dutroux X-Dossier, an anonymous letter sent into the Dutch Justice Ministry dated December 13, 1996. A group of 300 people formed a sect that exists in Holland. They organize orgies with children, 3 years and older. Members equals lawyers, jurists, judges, police officers. Meetings in rural estates, hotels. At one of the members, Schimmelpenninck. Example, Villa Westflyer in Markello Westerflyer, Nijenhuis estate, which, coincidentally, used to be a boarding school for girls from 1948 to the late 60s and has been in the possession of an aristocratic Schimmelpenninck family and the beach of Noordwijk. Meetings are held the first Saturday after the full moon, as well as on dates of Christian feasts or on anniversaries. Groups of 12 people with children, rapes and tortures of the children. Large meetings equals 50 adults and 50 children. Drugs, booze, orgies, rapes. Registration on video of abuse of kids. Apparently, a whistleblower who tried to inform the police was disbelieved and soon thereafter disappeared. A military intelligence operative that infiltrated the above pedo cult alleged that he observed Prince Bernhard, consort to the Queen, attending one of the satanic cult meetings at the Westerflyer estate. The Schimmelpenninck family were friends with the royal family that owned an estate in Markello, next town over, where Bernard's mother resided from 1952 to her death in 1971. The prince, his wife Queen Juliana, and their daughters, including Queen Beatrix and eventually Prince Claus, regularly spent holidays at the royal family estate in Markello. With a population of 17.5 million residents, the Netherlands is perhaps the most sexually permissive nation on earth where, like its neighbor Belgium, pedophilia runs rampant. In previous chapters, we learned that its capital Amsterdam is the world's child snuff porn headquarters and that Belgium's elite pedophilia network is inextricably bound to the Dutch child raping web as virtually one and the same. Recall the London, Amsterdam, Berlin trafficking network that attracted dozens of British and German pedophile criminals like Warwick Spinks and Welsh witch Alan Williams, both instrumental in the startup and proliferation of many child pornography studios and boy brothels located in and near Amsterdam. In January 2014, it was reported that even a top BBC executive owned a 3-story home in the heart of Amsterdam where one floor was exclusively reserved for the commercial production and distribution of child pornography. Films, abusing British boys from care homes trafficked to the big Dutch city where sex never sleeps. German implants Lothar Glandorf and Gary Ulrich also gravitated to fertile Dutch ground for child exploitation through trafficking and child pornography in Rotterdam and Zandvoort. These expatriates all found a home in Holland because of its sexually lax, highly permissive culture and tolerance for pedophilia. As recently as a year ago last June 2019, the NL Times re-raised the issue of banning a 1,000-plus page pedophile manual circulating freely in Europe's heartland, detailing the ins and outs of how to get away with committing acts of pedophilia against children without getting caught, debating to make possession and ownership of the manual in the Netherlands against the law. But Dutch Minister of Justice and Security, Ferdinand Grapperhaus, said it would nearly be impossible to ban based on feedback from his ministerial lawyers because the manual contains no criminal material. Boldface emphasis all mine. The last time I checked, sexually molesting children even in progressive Holland is still a crime. Yet such inane absurdity in applying such letter of the law interpretation prevails in this nation that appears to bend over backwards, protecting sodomites' criminal rights over victims' rights. In 2000, the Dutch chose to legalize prostitution, believing conditions for its sex workers would vastly improve. Yet within a few short years, it became increasingly apparent that such progressive legislation only created working conditions far worse and more dangerous for exploited, unprotected sex workers as victims, not to mention causing a growing influx of child sex trafficking, primarily from Eastern Europe. The law stands to be repealed since organized crime predatorily seized the moment, taking full advantage of this seemingly anything-goes national policy. Louise Shelley's Human Trafficking, A Global Perspective highlights yet another problem with organized crime controlling Dutch prostitution. In the Netherlands, with its long-standing red light districts, the trafficked prostitutes who cannot acquire work permits exist in an underground where they are paid less, suffer greater risks, and have no security for the future. She is referring to all those trafficked minors who make up nearly half of the nation's sex workers. The Netherlands, with its large mafia-controlled sex industry as the magnet drawing in trafficked girls from Eastern Europe, a whopping 90% of its sex workers are foreign, the most in all of Europe, and very many are underage. At the same time that the Netherlands was learning that its legalized prostitution wasn't working out as planned, similar to Britain's PIE, Pedophile Information Exchange, that operated politically from 1974 to 1984, in 2006, Dutch pedophiles opportunistically decided to launch their own political party, the Charity, Freedom and Diversity Party, NVD, advocating not only legalizing pedophilia, but bestiality as well, lowering the age of consent from 16 to 12, with intent to eventually eliminate consent altogether. An opinion poll at the time affirmed that 18% of Dutch respondents did not want the government interfering or stopping the new party from forming, with 1 in 3 believing that actively promoting pedophilia should not be illegal. A 2013 Guardian article casually mentions that a 1987 Dutch study actually found that a sample of boys in pedophilic relationships felt positive about them. Another Dutch study, featured in the spring 1983 Alternative Lifestyles Journal, published an article entitled Pedophile Relationships in the Netherlands, Alternative Lifestyle for Children, focusing on the positive value that 25 boys aged 10 to 16 attributed to their sexual relationship with their pedophile male partner of average age 39. A progressive social science attitude exists in the academia world of Europe and the US that views society's hangups as automatically programming, predisposing and prejudicing a lack of social acceptance of pedophilia through placement of such negative value judgment. This attitude is illustrated below in a passage from the above-referenced 1987 study conducted by the same Dutch researcher as in the earlier 1983 study. Our society's vision of sex and sexuality is rather unstable. For a decade or so, it can be rather supple, generally approving, and then, only a little later, everything sexual is seen as troublesome or problematic. This is especially true of sexual contacts between adults and minors. Toward the end of the 1970s, many Dutch newspapers, news and family magazines carried relatively positive articles about pedophilia, positive in the sense that an attempt was made in them to understand how both partners involved in pedophile relationships felt. At the same time, however, they invariably stressed the adverse judgment of society at large. This cultural perception appears to still be prevalent in the Netherlands. After recently informing a Dutch owner of a Bali restaurant located in the one-time Dutch colony that I was writing a book on the scourge of worldwide pedophilia with a serious, quizzical look, he queried, "What's wrong with pedophilia?" All these multiple reflectors, along with the preceding alarmingly hardcore facts, collectively provide all the tall tale signs that kids in Holland are not safe from lecherous child sexual predators since pedopromiscuity appears a culturally embedded societal norm, at least amongst a sizable portion of its adult male population. As with all Western nations, the royal and political elite are taking full advantage of this normalization process towards blasé acceptance of pedophilic relationships. No doubt that's precisely why the sexualization of children is so pervasive in global mass media. Despite the already presented evidence of pedophilia amongst Dutch royalty and friends, the lone gunman syndrome in the Netherlands applied to the Dutch pedo-scandal has centered around unproven allegations toward the most accused pedophile in the nation's history, the now former Secretary General of the Justice Ministry, Joris Demmink. From an April 18, 2016 Dutch News, NL article covering the civil case brought primarily against the former justice minister. A court in Amsterdam has begun hearing testimony from 9 witnesses into allegations that senior politicians knew about and used underage male prostitutes in the 1980s. Apparently, with gatekeeper Joris Demmink running the Dutch Justice Department, access to criminal court remained off limits to his pedophile victims. This unprecedented Dutch legal case of historic child sexual abuse in the 1980s and 1990s was filed by victim witnesses against Demmink. Witnesses told the newspaper they had observed boys no older than 15 get into his government car in The Hague's Schilderswijk neighborhood, one adding that he regularly took an Arab-looking boy. Witnesses also claimed that Demmink was apparently a client during the 1980s of a known pimp of underage boys, Dick Willard, who allegedly was murdered in 1991 by 2 of his former sex slaves. One witness recalled, Willard boasted about his customers, also about Demmink. Alleged victim Koos van Woudenberg testified that during his youth in the late 1980s, he was trafficked to an Amsterdam apartment belonging to Free University Modern History professor Ger van Roon, where a number of underage boys were regularly sodomized by former Justice Minister Joris Demmink, former Finance Minister and IMF head Onno Ruding, former Amsterdam Mayor Ed van Tijn, and even Prince Claus, husband of Queen Beatrix. Another witness in the 2016 abuse lawsuit was 43-year-old Bart van Wel, who alleged that at 15 years old, Demmink forced him to have sex in the back of his chauffeur-driven government car. Bart said that for several years, he was routinely drugged, sexually abused, and passed around by prominent men from the halls of government, and that much of it was filmed and sold as child pornography while simultaneously doubling as sexual blackmail evidence. Professor Van Roon maintained close ties between his powerful VIP friends and such notorious pedo brothel, owning procurers as Rotterdam's German Lothar Glandorf and Dutchman Karel Alex Maasdam, boys trafficked from Britain, Belgium, Germany, and Eastern Europe arriving at Amsterdam Central train station would be routinely picked up and delivered to Van Roon's home for christening orgies in the Dutch pedophile boy brothel network. Yet another Dutch government honcho linked to this same pedophile ring under investigation. In the 1998 Rolodex affair was former defense minister turned Amsterdam Appeals Court district attorney, the now deceased Job de Ruyter. A sling and arrow from an October 24, 2006 Metro article. And then we aren't even talking about the then Secretary of Defense Job de Ruyter, who, I read, not only was guilty of this cover-up defective landmine affair in which top army officials were involved, but was also blackmailed over the fact that he was committing immoral offenses with underage boys. Hans Leros, the NOS Journal editor-in-chief, wrote in 2004, "The name Joris Demmink had been given to me in conversations with detectives. These spoke about a 1998 investigation ran from a very secret location in Utrecht, an investigation into a network of top public officials, 2 district attorneys, one being Henry Hans Holtuis, out of the total of 19 at the time in the Netherlands, a former minister, Onno Ruding, a former attorney of the Queen, aforementioned Frits Salomonson, and a single professor, aforementioned Ger van Roon, who would have sex with underage boys. The investigation had begun at the direction of the College of Prosecutor Generals, instigated by the District Attorney of Amsterdam, Hans Vracking. Prosecutor Hans Vracking had collected enough information to move forward with the Central Detective Information Service, CRI, conducting searches on some of the above suspects, several of the district attorneys, primarily Henry Hans Holtuis, Jan Wolter Wabeke, and Henk Woldrik. So just as the police were closing in on busting the biggest pedophilia scandal in Dutch history in 1998, Chief of the National Police Services Agency Joop de Wies, Holland's top cop overseeing the Rolodex investigation, then leaked it to the then Justice Secretary General, Demmink's predecessor, Harry Borghout's. according to DA Hans Vracking. And then something very strange happened. I will never forget it. One morning the telephone rings. Harry Borghout, the Secretary General of the Ministry of Justice, calls. "What are you involved in?" he yelled. "You are busy investigating one of my officials." I said, "About whom are we talking here?" He said, "Demmink." Then I said, "We investigate many things here, but Demmink is not part of the investigation." Though Demmink's name had arisen regarding complaints from his driver Rob Mostert, and Demmink was Professor Van Roon's friend listed in his Rolodex, apparently Vrocking's main purpose for the police investigation was simply inquiring about involvement of his fellow chief district attorneys. Again, in Vrocking's own words, in the intelligence work, it turned out that compromising information by the BVD, Dutch intelligence, now AIVD about Demmink. The driver of Demmink, Rob Mostert, told the BVD that he couldn't stand it anymore. He was troubled that Demmink occasionally had sex with boys in his government car. In the end, after a discussion with Fred Teven, it was decided not to investigate information about Demmink because it lay outside the reach of the Rolodex case. We tactically focused ourselves on two chief officers, Wabeke and Wooldrik, and the VU professor Ger van Roon. Thus, the name Demmink was most certainly mentioned, but not investigated deeper. Seems very odd that only fellow DAs listed in Roon's Rolodex file were of interest to Vrocking, while the more powerful Demmink and cabinet ministers also listed in Roon's file were allegedly not pursued. The obvious reason would be that pedo investigations never go as high as government ministers. Though Demmink was already implicated as a pedophile 4 years before taking over the Justice Ministry, already in 1998 because of his rising star status and political clout, Demmink no doubt was considered off-limits and untouchable. So long before Demmink was cherry-picked to lead his nation's justice system, the Dutch government already was well aware of his criminal behavior, but because he was a compromised, controlled puppet by Blackmail, he was the perfect groom candidate for the job. In Lucifer's world, Amsterdam DA Vracking's boss, Prosecutor General René Fick, weighed in on the aborted investigation. To this day, I don't know how Borghout got it in his head to call me up while it involved secret intelligence. Borghout claimed that he heard about the Rolodex investigation from Demmink, and Demmink says he heard about it from some chief officer in the Justice Department, Hans Halthuis. That is absolutely impossible. I was the only chief officer who knew about the investigation. Meanwhile, CYA Borghout said he didn't recall the conversation with Vracking, insisting that René Fick revealed the investigation to him. Obviously, someone's lying and evidence leads to Borghout. Almost 2 decades later, 2 detectives from this 1998 Rolodex investigation were called in as trial witnesses on behalf of victim plaintiffs in the 2016 civil suit. After all, Professor Van Roon's Rolodex file included names and numbers of some of the most powerful pedophiles atop the Netherlands government. By the time police raided Roon's home in 1998, Demmink had already tipped the professor off and all incriminating evidence had been removed from the premises. Despite what the big boys were saying, the court testimony of the 2 police witnesses in 2016 implicated Joris Demmink as a prime suspect in their aborted inquiry into the Dutch VIP pedo network. But in keeping with every child sex abuse scandal to date, an order from above suddenly commanded police to cease and desist midway through their probe. That order from on high originated with the nation's corrupt pedo-protecting police chief Joop de Wijs. Meanwhile, Rolodex detective Jaap Hoek reported that underage boys were in possession of secret phone numbers belonging to top Dutch officials. 113 Vice Squad officer Leen de Coder confirmed that the Rolodex investigation was destroyed, dead in the water thanks to his boss of bosses Joop de Wijs, who should have minimally faced obstruction of justice charges. One of the former detectives in the Rolodex probe commented in court in the 2016 civil case, "I've never come across an investigation like it being halted halfway." If he conferred with his cohorts in Britain or Belgium, he couldn't say that. As soon as prominent child rapists are about to be arrested in every national cover-up, an order from on high is always given to abruptly halt all police investigations and destroy missing evidence as standard cover-up protocol. Despite the cat already let out of the bag by Hans Vracking, in early March 2014, the then Dutch Minister of Security and Justice Ivo Opstelten still continued lying through his teeth, emphatically claiming that Demmink did not appear in any way in the Rolodex investigation. See how puppets like trained seals in the circus system are reflexively taught to always lie, 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 and deny, 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 right to their bitter end? Obstelton's bitter end politically came a mere year later in March 2015, forced to resign in disgrace after being caught in yet another lie with fellow fibber Fred Teven, both minimizing the amount the state secretly compensated in a payment to convicted drug trafficker Cease Hellman, both falsely insisting it was 2 million guilders when in fact it was a whopping 4.7 million. In January 2017, yet another political casualty over the faux pas of restarting the livelihood of a busted drug dealer is yet another Minerva member and Justice Minister, Obstelton's successor Ard van der Steur. Why would the government owe money to any convicted major drug trafficker anyway? So they can make more money harming more people, dealing more drugs? Converting that large sum of money to USD, what the fuck is Holland giving a convicted drug trafficker almost $2.5 million US, regardless of any initial overcharge? It's like the government's in bed with the criminals. Oh yeah, they are. When we're living in an insane world gone mad, that's what thoroughly corrupt, drug-pushing, pedo-infested governments do. The cabal finances the traffickers. A final point, if these two dipshit politicians would bother lying over their secret cashback deal with a major criminal, they most certainly will lie to cover up and protect powerful child rapists guilty of involvement in the biggest pedophilia scandal in Dutch history. Getting back to the Dutch pedophilia problem, another victim witness interviewed by detectives during the 1998 Rolodex investigation prior to its shutdown stated that he had been abused by VIP pedophiles since he was 14 years old. His statement to NOS News, "I had to go with procurer Mr. Maasdam to the festival bar. I have been in the SM sadomasochism cellars of Frits Salomonson, former house lawyer of the royal family on the Kaiser's Canal 497. That's where I saw Prince Claus. I also saw people, which I know have disappeared later on, no one heard from them again. I was brought to Salomonson in a black car. His house is decorated with lots of marble details. There was an enormous living room. On the right, a stairway down into the cellars. Leather hats, whips, chains, all that sort of things would hang on the walls. That's when I saw Prince Claus. I was under the influence of drugs and was penetrated. Mr. Karel Maasdam abused us in Salomonson's cellars. If the above description of S&M abuse in a cellar torture chamber referring to those who soon disappeared sounds eerily familiar to the Marc Dutroux case, it's because it is the same interlinking network operating in bordering countries. As alluded to in the last chapter, Dutroux made many trips to the Netherlands in his role as both child pornographer and network procurer, and many underage victims in the Netherlands were trafficked from Belgium and vice versa. This same witness had this to say about prime suspect Joris Demmink. Demmink mainly had anal sex with young boys. He is abusive. He was able to become SG Secretary General of the Justice Department because he has sensitive material on Prince Claus, which has been recorded at Salomonson's house. I am prepared to declare that in front of a camera too. Demmink is in contact with foreign intelligence services, and he shared the material of Prince Claus with them. In 2016, the Dutch pedo establishment sent disgraced junior justice minister puppet Fred Teven into the civil case courtroom in Utrecht to defend Joris Demmink. Back in 1998, Teven worked in the public prosecution office with DA Hans Vracking, so he was there to testify in order to directly contradict both the victim witnesses and police investigators' court testimony, bogusly claiming that Demmink was never considered a suspect in the Rolodex investigation. Despite the known catalog of allegations of protracted abuse piling up on Demmink, dogging him for close to 3 decades, a familiar theme among the more infamous unindicted VIP pervs, including charges that, in 1995 Turkey, Demmink raped 2 more boys aged 11 and 14 at the time, yet it never seemed to obstruct his ascending career path. You can be the biggest sodomizer in the world, and as long as you do what you're told, you're home free to live a privileged life in renowned luxury as a so-called pillar of society, again only in Lucifer's world. As soon as Piet Hein Donner was selected Justice Minister in 2002, Demmink was promoted as his Justice Ministry Secretary General for the next decade, right up to Demmink's November 2012 retirement. As mentioned earlier, Donner was among the invited guests to a Dutch elite's child blood sacrifice. Is it any wonder he'd no sooner become Holland's Justice Minister and appoint Demmink his top civil servant in charge? And in response to the recurrent allegations of Demmink abuse, Donner threatened media with lawsuits if they dare even mention his name, refusing to open an investigation, smugly replying, "There is not a trace of smoke, let alone fire." Emil Broersma, head of the CRI surveillance operation into Justice Department officials' pedophilia, exposed all the liars and deniers, maintaining that in late 1998, prior to the Rolodex investigation shutdown, Demmink were all suspected of organized child abuse. As the Justice Department's rising star, when his raping Turkish boys kept coming up, Demmink simply had the Dutch embassy lie, claiming the accused pedophile hadn't set foot in Turkey since 1986. Meanwhile, travel documents confirmed Demmink had been there at least 5 times since the 1995 alleged crime, and depositions from both Dutch and Turkish law enforcement officials called him out as a child rapist. Turkish police officer Mehmet Korkmaz has gone on record stating that he was assigned to head security for Demmink during his trips to Turkey, but instead was requested to abduct young boys off the street so the predator could rape them. Additionally, there are 4 police reports and 6 victims who identified Demmink as their alleged abuser in Turkey alone. Yet the same stooge that threatened defamation suits and lied to keep Demmink's ass out of jail went on to become longtime Dutch Minister of State until 2018, and, as of 2019, Piet Hein Donner is The Hague's current Carnegie Foundation chairman, rewarded for his years as a pedo enabler to lead an institution that quintessentially represents the NWO crime cabal. See how the system works in Lucifer's world, where no misdeed goes unrewarded? Repeated complaints from both Demmink's government limo drivers and heads of federal transportation had already been common knowledge to the BVD intelligence services prior to his appointment in 2002 to head the Justice Ministry. But with Demmink's extensive involvement and support from both Dutch intelligence and how the inner elite's pedo club operates inside and out of the Netherlands through sexual blackmail, since the 1980s, the accused pedophile's meteoric fast-track rise in professional standing was actually enhanced. In September 2015, the Turkish government ultimately refused to hand over its extensive files regarding the long-beleaguered 1995 Turkish rape case, as a deal had been struck a full 2 decades earlier between the Dutch pedo establishment and Turkey. Vulnerable to blackmail, known pedophiles the world over are compromised and controlled pawns in Lucifer's great game of chessboard geopolitics. In exchange for the accused serial pedophile's non-prosecution, Turkish officials blackmailed Demmink in 2002 to ensure that Kurdish gangster Hüseyin Beybasin, living in the Netherlands, received a maximum life imprisonment sentence for drug smuggling and conspiracy for murder allegedly based on false evidence. According to former Dutch Criminal Intelligence Service CID Chief Claus Langendoen. But then Claus Langendoen himself is not above reproach, allegedly allowing large heroin shipments to pass through Dutch customs in Haarlem during the 1980s IRT scandal. This all comes out after the former CID head himself conducted a Demmink rape investigation in Turkey. A UPI article stated in March 2013, a report labeled EK Rapor prepared by Turkish intelligence officer Hüseyin Çelebi revealed how Demmink's sexual tourism in Turkey under different aliases was used to blackmail the Dutch authorities to neutralize a senior Kurdish separatist leader and notorious drug trafficker. A Turkish journalist showed Langendoen a video of Demmink's Turkish driver stating he was also required to procure boys for Demmink, as well as a report showing the blackmail deal struck between then Turkish Prime Minister Tansu Çiller and the then Dutch Justice Minister Winnie Zorgdrager. In July 1998, under Winnie's watch, Reuters broke the story in the thick of the Zandvoort scandal that a Justice Ministry employee, supposedly not Demmink, was fired for distributing massive amounts of downloaded child pornography images and file videos within the internal Justice Department network, implicating inside the ministry legions of child porn-consuming pedophiles. The Reuters article asserted, since those June Zandvoort revelations, Dutch police and justice officials have been criticized for alleged slowness in responding to leads and for brushing aside tip-offs. Dutch newspapers have criticized police for spending more time hounding Marcel Vervlossum's anti-child abuse NGO Morkoven for the material in its possession than on tracking suspected members of the ring. Again, huge cover-up of nasty players infested throughout the Dutch government and high society, scrambling desperately to cover up the world's largest internet child porn bust in history at the time, with direct tentacles implicating lots of the most powerful sickos not just in Holland, but the entire world. This child pornography web hub stumbled upon in Holland has direct links to the child sex slave network operating internationally by the pedocrime cabal throughout Europe, Russia, and the United States. And evidence of a list of worldwide VIP child porn customers was never followed up, but simply suppressed. After all, those powerful players around the world of course had to be protected. That was the Dutch Justice Ministry's job, hence the slow response. Under the unwanted glare of a growing number of cover-up allegations, Justice Minister Winnie Zorgdrager reportedly fired all the top brass in her department except Joris Demmink. Meanwhile, journalists in both Netherlands and Turkey, along with families of alleged Demmink victims, have had their lives threatened, imprisoned, and personal rights grossly violated by a concerted campaign to neutralize threats, seeking justice, and exposing the truth. From the March 2013 UPI piece. Turkish authorities allegedly possess a video of Demmink raping an underage boy together with other incriminating evidence of Demmink's sexual tourism in Turkey in the 1990s, which he continues to deny having visited at that time. Former Chief of Police of Istanbul, Necdet Menzir, and Officer Mehmet Korkmaz, who was responsible for Demmink's security during 3 visits, both contradict his Demmink's claim that he hasn't visited Turkey. Now let's look at the other blackmail dealmaker securing protection for Joris Demmink, Turkish Prime Minister Tansu Çiller. After taking her postdoctoral studies at Yale University, notorious CIA recruiting ground, and becoming an American dual citizen in 1970, the rising star became Turkey's youngest female professor at 36. And just 8 years later, in 1990, Tansu Çiller entered politics. Within 3 years, she was miraculously elected as her nation's first female prime minister from 1993 to 1996. Talk about a meteoric fast track to success. With a little help from her CIA friends, she proved quite a wheeler-dealer, aligned ever so tightly with Western elites. As Turkey's CIA puppet leader, in 1995, when Joris Demmink was busily engaging in his alleged sex tourism rapes under her leadership, a deal was struck with the Netherlands. No prosecution for Joris in Turkey, for full prosecution in Holland for the Kurd Bay Basin. In 1997, at a NATO meeting serving as Turkey's then foreign minister, Tansu met her only female NATO member counterpart, War Criminal Secretary of State Madeleine. "We think the price is worth it." Albright, infamous for her May 1996 60 Minutes performance on national TV, justifying her cold-blooded decision, killing 500,000 Iraqi kids. In Brussels just 9 months later, the starstruck, giddy, 2 peas in a pod Tansu nearly peed her pants, exclaiming, "It's the 2 of us, Madeleine, I'm so excited." Tansu Çiller's unbridled groveling towards her US idol aside, by century's end, the Western pawn was about used up, having fallen out of political favor with her own people and subsequently investigated for her widespread corruption that, on technicalities, she managed to dodge, no doubt with a little more help from her fellow American friends. She had proven to her people she'd rather stay in good stead with her Western masters than protect little Turkish boys allegedly raped on her watch by a reputed Dutch untouchable despicable. An added twist of foul play suspicion, the 41-year-old Turkish super prosecutor, as he was dubbed, assigned the Demmink rape case, Murat Gök, suddenly wound up dead at his home in April 2013. Add to the suicided list Dutch government chauffeur with a conscience Rob Mostert, who saw the backseat predator in action, registering a complaint against Demmink, and then found mysteriously dead in 2000.